would land on them and destroy the area. Rather than fleeing inside the castle, it was probably safer to stay somewhere where the golem's movements were visible and he could run whenever he wanted. Despite wanting to flee immediately, Hiroaki held his ground with a vexed look. Everyone, stay together. Sorcerers, set essence barriers in the air. Knights, take your positions and stay alert. King Francois called over the figures nearby and gave orders to his sorcerers and knights to guard them. Magicae Murum. The royal sorcerers set up layers of essence barriers of light overhead to protect them from any attacks. Immediately after, the second golem descended upon the rooftop garden so fast, the sound of its arrival was left behind. No sooner had it done so, it softly came to a stop right above the floor of the roof, like a bird's feather ignoring all air pressure and inertia. It was a silent appearance unimaginable for its huge, 2-meter large size. Its silver mechanical body released a divine radiance that, combined with its feathered wings, made it look just like a beautiful angel. While everyone else was taken aback with fascination, Goki immediately ran towards the golem. NGH. He was so fast, it was as if his legs had grown wings. So light. When he moved, he could feel it clearly. His physical body enhancement was at a much higher degree than usual. The cause of that had been Miho, who had cast magic before disappearing with Celia. Si vis pacem, para bellum legio. Setting aside the question of why Miho could use magic, the effect of her spell was extremely reassuring right now. His initial velocity surpassed that of a werebeast warrior, who were far superior to humans in physical ability. But even then, the golem was faster. It hovered a hair's breadth above the ground and glided towards Goki. Before he knew it, the swinging fist of the golem was right before his eyes. Its aim was locked onto his face with unmatched accuracy. In that instant, Goki could see his head flying off in his mind. There was no time for him to even blink. Even so, Goki's katana was already moving. He was able to react thanks to his many years of combat experience, and his potential that had been increased by Miho. If he had lacked any one of these things, he would have died to that strike just now. Gah! Goki forced the side of his katana into the golem's arm and swung it, using the recoil to move his body aside. Immediately after, the golem's fist passed by the side of Goki's face. The golem's fist created a strong tremor in the air that shook Goki's eardrum, making him frown. But he couldn't afford to take his eyes off the golem. He turned to face the golem and kept its body within his field of view. When facing it from this close, its presence and essence made him want to step back. But he had approached the golem in the first place in order to make the first move. Humph! Goki boldly swung his katana down. On top of reducing his movements to the utmost extent, his supersonic strike was sharp enough to easily slice through rock. Any regular opponent would struggle to react, but the golem's sharp-pointed tail swayed. It shot forward, aimed right at Goki's katana. Goki extended his swing to continue slashing at the golem. But the golem's tail could move freely like a whip, preventing him from doing so. Its main body didn't budge in the slightest, as though to say its tail was enough of an opponent for him. In fact, Goki was unable to get any closer past the tail. The moment he stepped within reach, the tail would shoot towards him, and it was all he could do to deflect that. If he stepped too far into its range, he could see himself being sliced into two. And if he went even further into the range of the golem's arms, this could be bad. He couldn't see any chance of winning. He was swinging his katana with all his might, but he couldn't see the depths of the golem at all. His hand was going numb from the impact, and it was dubious whether he could keep up with the speed of the tail. Goki broke out in a cold sweat. "I will draw this one away. Retreat to somewhere out of its sight now," he yelled at those standing behind him. It was dangerous to evacuate inside when the golem's attacks could cause a collapse at any moment, but with the golems right beside them, it was safer than remaining here. However, the golem wasn't about to wait patiently for them to move. The next moment, the feather blades separated from its wings and scattered through the air. "Place all barriers towards the front." Francois immediately ordered the royal sorcerers. All the sorcerers moved the light barriers they had cast overhead to surround Satsuki and the others instead. But before the barriers completely blocked them off, Goki's wife, Kyoko, and Lieselot's attendant, Arya, stepped outside of them. "I will team up with my husband to lure the blades away. Everyone, use this chance to retreat to safety." Kyoko and Arya gave orders for retreat and split into two directions as though they were moving in sync. The majority of the feather blades swiftly followed after them. Countless blades approached at a rapid rate, not even Kyoko or Arya could deal with them directly. They focused solely on keeping their feet moving, luring the feathers after them as much as they could. Goki, Kyoko, and Arya were risking their lives to buy time. The problem was whether there was a refuge inside the castle that was both out of sight of the golem and not at risk of collapsing from an attack. "Everyone, fall back. There's a royal escape passage underground. We can evacuate there," King Francois said. A royal escape passage was only used to abandon the castle in an emergency. It was a place meant to be kept an absolute secret to outsiders, but Francois must have deemed the current situation to be an emergency. Humph. Goki swung his katana frantically to keep the golem pinned as long as possible. "Look out, your back is unguarded," Kyoko yelled. She noticed that a portion of the feather blades were approaching him from behind. Gah! Goki had no choice but to leap to the side. The feather blades made perpendicular turns to avoid hitting the golem's main body and followed his movements. As a result, Goki was forced away from the golem, setting it free. Oh no! Goki promptly tried to approach the golem again, but the feathers pursuing him didn't allow him to do so. Immediately after, the golem closed in on Francois and the others who had already commenced retreating. It swung its arm, smashing through the barrier like it was shattering glass. The sorcerers quickly moved the remaining essence barriers around them before the golem. At that moment, the golem's strong arm swayed, and its fist burst forward, smashing through the new barriers one after another. All the barriers were broken through in a mere few seconds, leaving Francois and the others within completely undefended. "Protect His Majesty!" A knight inside the barriers yelled. All the knights stepped forward to form a human shield. "Move it!" Satsuki yelled. She charged at the golem, thrusting forward her spear-shaped divine arms that she had materialized. Ha! Wind like a condensed storm was released forward from the tip of the spear. A terrible gale blew fiercely in an attempt to force the golem back. And while the raging winds blew around the golem, blocking its vision, Lieselot and Christine both decided to cast a spell at the same time. Ictus Lancia. Fulgur Sphera. A thick lance of ice and intense bolt of lightning was sucked into the wind and attacked the golem. Ictus Lancia. Fulgur Sphera. Seeing that, Liliana and Charlotte also cast the same spells, providing more support. The other sorcerers also began casting spell after spell into the storm surrounding the golem. "Now's your chance. Quickly. Get inside," was what Satsuki was about to yell at the people behind her. But at that moment, something struck her chest with a thump. The feeling was accompanied by the sensation of her body floating. Huh? Satsuki slowly looked down. The golem's tail had extended through the wind and pierced through her chest. There was a hole opened right through her chest, which the tail was using to lift her up. The divine arm's spear slipped out of Satsuki's hand. The raging wind extending from its tip vanished as she let go of the spear. The falling spear clattered to the floor and disappeared into particles of light like a spirit turning into its spirit form. Satsuki, Latifa, Mosoto, and Aki screamed. "Ah! Oh, I'm dead," was the thought that crossed Satsuki's mind. Everyone's going to be worried. I have to tell them it'll be okay. Thoughts rapidly flashed through her head. Everyone, run. With a pale face, Satsuki smiled at Latifa and the others, but the golem flicked its tail as though to say such sentiments were worthless, flinging Satsuki's body aside. Her body fell heavily to the ground, and it rolled across the floor of the garden and stopped moving. A large amount of blood was flowing from the hole in her chest, creating a puddle of blood. Masato's eyes turned bloodshot with anger as he grabbed his divine arm's sword. Latifa wasn't armed with a weapon, but she clenched her fists and readied herself for combat. Hey, you guys. Hiroaki called out to stop them. The golem's combat power was painfully evident. There was no way they had any chance of winning. Challenging it would just result in unnecessary deaths. Of course, Masato and Latifa understood that too. The fear was clear in their side profiles. Even so, their eyes burned with fighting spirit, unwilling to forgive the golem, but there were some things in this world that couldn't be dealt with using feelings alone. The golem was the embodiment of that. Everyone. Above the castle, Aishia, Sarah, Orphea, and Alma were busy dealing with the first golem that had regenerated. Exhausted from the earlier battle, Aishia was struggling just to evade the attacks. She couldn't save those in the garden even if she wanted to, and there was a look of panic on her usually emotionless face. It was a hopeless situation. The golem standing before Latifa and the others was unharmed from the attacks they had launched at it. It spread the wings of light on its back and formed enough spears to blow away everyone on the roof. There was nowhere to run. It was at that moment that a thick pillar of light rose from a corner of the rooftop garden. Chapter 4, Counterattack Signal. In the rooftop garden of the Galak Castle, a huge pillar of light stretched up to the sky. The wondrous sight captured everyone's gazes, almost making them forget about the precarious situation they were in. However, there was an odd sense of déjà vu to the scene. A hero summoning. Christina mumbled in confusion. Indeed, the pillar of light was terribly similar to that of a hero summoning. The golem turned its body away, wary of the pillar of light. The spears extending from its wings were aimed at the pillar, ready to fire at any moment. Two figures appeared within the light as it faded. It was a boy in his late teens and a young girl standing beside him. Who? In other words, it was Rio and Sora, who should have been in the holy city Tonarico of the Almada Kingdom. But those in the rooftop garden didn't know who Rio and Sora were. They blinked at them blankly in shock. Where are we? Meanwhile, Rio and Sora were just as confused. After all, as mentioned already, the two of them were just in the holy city Tonarico of the Almada Kingdom mere moments ago. They had just encountered the priestess named Eru at the entrance of the labyrinth by the city, and now. The Galak Castle? Why? Rio's eyes widened as he realized they had returned to the Galak Castle, far from the holy kingdom of Almada. Then, he noticed the disastrous spectacle around them. Rio's face fell as he spotted Satsuki lying in a puddle of blood with a large hole in her chest. His gaze immediately froze over with anger. When he saw Masato with his sword and Latifa with her fists clenched for combat, he understood that the culprit was the golem they were facing. He could also see Aishia being pressured by another golem in the sky above them. Why is that thing here? Dragon Key, Master Rio. Shocked by the sight of the golems, Sora immediately tried to report something to Rio. But when she saw how furious the normally gentle Rio was, she swallowed her words. The golem seemed to be aware that Rio and Sora were no ordinary people. It watched them with a cautious glare, calling back the feather blades that were attacking Goki, Kyoko, and Arya. Goki, Kyoko, and Arya used that chance to return to Latifa and Lieselot to strengthen their defenses. Sora, can you protect everyone? Rio asked, taking out a mask from his breast pocket. Yup. Leave it to me. Sora replied energetically. Rio instantly vanished from where he stood. Everyone's eyes widened in shock, it almost looked like he had teleported. But the golem was able to follow Rio's rapid speed and turned to face him immediately. Dissolvo. Rio had moved beside Satsuki and was taking a sheet out of his time-space cache. He wrapped her in the sheet, covering the hole in her chest, and gently picked her up in his arms. Just then, a telepathic message from Aishia reached him. Haruto. I'm sorry I couldn't protect everyone. I couldn't protect Satsuki. She sounded quite regretful as she apologized to him. It's not your fault, Aishia. Rio replied immediately. At the same time, the feather blades the golem had called back all shot towards him. Countless orbs of light immediately appeared around Rio and flew towards the golem, repelling each of the feather blades approaching him. Of course, the feather blades were unharmed by such an attack. Wah! Christina, Lieselot, and the others watching on were all rendered speechless, but it was only the beginning. Rio vanished once again, this time with Satsuki in his arms, and reappeared beside the dumbfounded group on the rooftop. "Satsuki is alive," he said to them. "Huh?" Everyone reacted with disbelief. Although the wound was currently hidden behind the sheet, they had all witnessed the golem's tail opening a hole through her chest. Her heart and lungs should have been torn apart, causing enough damage to instantly kill her. It was hard to imagine her still being alive after that. "She'll regain consciousness soon, but let her rest for now. I'll take care of that thing. It won't lay a hand on anyone else," Rio said quietly. The golem spread its wings of light as though to rise to the challenge. The wings glowed brightly as the spears all fired towards Rio. "Master Rio." "I know." Sora yelled as she held out a hand at the golem. Rio did the same. Immediately after, countless spears of light hurtled towards them. They struck one after another, causing a series of fierce explosions. Light burst brightly, forcing many of those watching on to clench their eyes shut. The blast had enough force to blow apart the average human. "Huh?" But everyone noticed the lack of pain they felt and gingerly opened their eyes. Rio and Sora stood before them, casting a barrier of light together. That was apparently strong enough to block all the light spears. The barrier was also angled to direct all the shock waves upwards, minimizing the damage to the floor. Just then, the golem suddenly appeared right before Rio, swinging its fist at the barrier. Shock waves surged, causing a small earthquake on the floor. However, there was so much essence poured into the barrier between Rio and Sora, not even a crack appeared at the golem's punch. Wow! As fellow spirit art casters, Komomo and Sayo understood how hard it was to create such a strong barrier. They gulped in awe. "Sora, I'll take care of this guy. It seems to be quite troublesome. Could you go assist Aishia?" Rio asked, glaring at the golem. "Understood. These guys are golems created by the wise gods, so please be careful." Sora nodded anxiously and gave him an explanation. "This thing is?" Sora had mentioned that they were once disciples of the 7 wise gods the first time he met her. And now there was one right before him. Rio took a deep breath. "Sorry, it might be a very dangerous fight," he said, worrying for Sora's safety. What are you saying? There's no way we'd lose to these guys. Sora will clean that guy up with Aishia in no time at all, Sora said proudly. "See you later." She rose into the sky and flew away. The golem manipulated its feather blades into going after her, but Rio deployed numerous orbs of light to intercept the feathers. As a result, the golem's feathers were all deflected by the orbs, and Sora safely reached Aishia and the others. The golem shot Sora a sidelong glance. "Hey!" Rio had moved before the golem in the blink of an eye. Then, with a right fist wrapped in wind spirit arts, he punched the golem in the abdomen. In that instant, condensed wind exploded, blowing the golem's body back by a meter. "Pay attention," he said in a cold voice. He kept moving forward to keep the golem's attention on him, this time throwing his left fist forward. Rio activated the wind spirit arts wrapped around his left hand, but the golem only backed away a little this time. By backing away at the moment of impact, it killed the momentum behind Rio's attack. There was enough force to blow an unguarded human to pieces, but the golem only shifted slightly. At that moment, Rio understood how abnormal his opponent was. Meanwhile, golem seemed to have determined Rio was a greater threat than the others, as it took its attention off Sora and glared at him with its eerily glowing gaze. Its tail wavered like a mirage, taking aim at Rio's heart, but the wind spirit arts around Rio's right hand accurately smashed into the tip of the tail, diverting its trajectory astray. It pierced Satsuki's heart with this tale. Ryo realized how the hole in Satsuki's chest had gotten there and frowned bitterly. He would be the one to punish it. I will be your opponent. He stood before the golem, determined to protect the people behind him. High in the sky above the Galak castle, Ryo's and Sora's summoning had put a temporary stop to the golem attacking Aishia and the spirit folk girls. However, once the golem on the rooftop garden began attacking Ryo, the golem in the sky resumed its attack on Aishia. Feather blades danced through the sky under its control. Aishia instantly used her wind spirit art to push her physical body into accelerating towards the golem. Sarah, Orphea, and Alma were unable to react to the golem's speed fast enough, so she decided that she had to be the one to put a stop to it. Fortunately, thanks to Ryo being summoned nearby, he was able to transfer essence to her through their contract path. It was more effective to have physical contact with the contract holder, so she couldn't recover all her lost essence in a single go. I can keep fighting like this. It had the boon of giving her much more leeway with her magic essence. Thanks to that, she could heal the injuries on her abdomen and legs that she had been ignoring in favor of using her essence on flying. Although it wasn't a hindrance to maintaining a physical body, the pain spirits felt in their incarnated body could potentially reduce their physical ability. It would have been quite harsh on Aishia to fight with a hole in her abdomen, but she was able to move sharply now that she was healed. However, though it was easier for her to fight, it didn't change how formidable of an opponent the golem was. She had only been able to land an effective hit earlier thanks to Sarah, Orphea, and Alma diverting its attention. Which was why she was still forced to focus her efforts into defensively evading its attacks. But this time, Ryo's and Sora's reassuring presences kept her calm. It was at this moment that Sora left Ryo's side and ran over to support Aishia. She flew over faster than the speed of sound, shooting up from below to land a punch against the golem with her partially materialized dragon body. The golem's body that had been unharmed until now was easily blown back over 10 meters. Its momentum eventually diminished and it came to a stop. There had been significant force behind the punch, as the area where it was hit was dented. Wah! Sarah and the other girls were wide-eyed in amazement. Hey, Aishia! You're just gonna be in the way with a tattered mask like that. Go to the Dragon King's side. Sora will take care of this. Sora came to a stop before the golem as she called out to Aishia behind her. This is a really dangerous opponent, Aishia said hesitantly. Although she was worried about Ryo fighting below them, she was also concerned about Sora fighting alone. Oh? Do you think Sora needs your concern? Aishia silently conveyed her affirmation through her gaze, which Sora noticed when she looked over her shoulder. Sora is well aware of how dangerous this opponent is. Which is all the more reason you should go to the other fight, where there are more hindrances. You're not going to make Master Ryo fight alone in such a situation, are you? She shrugged in exasperation and waved her hand to shoo Aishia away. Got it. Thank you for coming to save me, Sora, Aishia said to her back. Huh? It's not like Sora came here for your sake, Sora snapped with a blush. But when she looked over her shoulder, Aishia was no longer there. She had already started moving towards Ryo. We're going to descend, you three. You can leave this one to Sora, Aishia called out to Sarah and the others on her way down to the rooftop garden. But. Sarah, Orphea, and Alma's gazes looked over at the blushing Sora. They seemed reluctant to leave such a small child behind, which was a sensible reaction to have. The force behind her punch had been stupendous, but her appearance was still that of a helpless little girl. Humph. As usual, you make no sense. Being relied on and thanked by someone was new to Sora, which was probably why she turned her head away shyly. Meanwhile, the spirit folk girls were hesitant about what to do. They gazed at the back of the small figure floating before them. Hey, you three, Sora called out without looking back. You're in the way. Get out of here, she ordered. But Sarah and the others still hesitated. Just then, The golem instantly repaired the dent in its armor from Sora's attack and moved close to her. The spirit folk girls only noticed it after it had closed the distance to and finished swinging its fist. However, Sora's partially materialized dragon arm was able to catch the golem's powerful fist directly. The golem silently attempted to push its fist forward, but Sora pushed back with just as much strength. Sarah, Orphea, and Alma were speechless, watching on with bated breath. Do you get it now? If you weren't able to react to this thing's movements just now, you'll just be in the way. Hurry up and run, Sora urged them. I understand. Let's go. Sarah bit her lip in vexation, but she wasn't immature enough to avoid seeing reality for what it was. Sensing the gap in their ability, she called for Orphea and Alma to retreat. Orphea and Alma nodded with bitter looks and began to descend. Humph, now Sora can fight to her heart's content. Sora huffed and glared at the golem she was facing. The golem then manipulated its feather blades to attack the girls that were descending. Sora immediately released the golem and vanished. Dragon wings materialized on her back, allowing her to fly faster than the feather blades and slap them away before they could reach the girls. How dare you look away while facing Sora? Sora charged towards the golem once again, flapping her wings. At the same time, another huge pillar of light rose from the Galak castle. Huh? Sora came to a screeching stop and stared at the pillar. The golem's gaze was similarly drawn to the light, but there was something about this pillar that was different from the one that summoned Rio and Sora before. The pillar of light that had summoned them had been too bright to see through, but the one rising now was transparent. In addition to that, this new pillar of light came to a stop after rising to a certain height and started expanding outwards, covering the entire city like a dome. A barrier? But there's no human out there that can cast a barrier of this ridiculous scale. Are they using the ley line of the land? Sora quickly analyzed what was happening using the knowledge she had already. Wait, don't tell me, was it Lena? Or another wise god? When considering who could have activated the barrier, Lena and the other wise gods were the first to come to mind. The fact that the golems, weapons once created by the wise gods, were here also supported the theory of the wise gods being involved. What on earth is happening? Sora frowned in annoyance and returned her gaze to the golem. Meanwhile, in the sky far above where Sora was fighting, I've been had. Rice was stuck outside of the barrier. He had a rare frown of displeasure on his face as he sighed and formed an essence bullet at his fingertips. He fired it at the barrier, but the moment it made contact, it burst and scattered. A barrier to prevent external entry and defend against attacks, I see. It probably has other effects too. That woman has no intention of hiding her involvement after all. A barrier of this scale couldn't be activated on the spot. It had to have been prepared long in advance. Either way, as long as this barrier was here, Rice was split from the two golems he had deployed. It may be possible to destroy the barrier if I deployed the third golem, but the problem was what would happen after breaking the barrier and getting inside. He didn't know what other traps were prepared, and Rio and Sora had been summoned within the barrier already. Not even the golems could stand a chance against the Dragon King that Rice knew. All they could do was buy time. It would be foolish to continue deploying his forces without any chance of victory. However, Rio wasn't the Dragon King that Rice knew 1,000 years ago. There was no telling how much of the Dragon King's power he could use. Two golems should be a good test of how irregular his combat power is. Although that changes my original goal quite a bit. He should use this chance to evaluate him. It was the least he could do after his plans to use golems to eliminate Celia and the others in Rio's and Sora's absence had been ruined by their summoning. I'm also curious about what that woman will do next. With that, Rice decided to watch over the fight within the barrier instead. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Galak castle. What was the sorcery you just activated? Celia asked Miho, who was standing beside her as she gazed in awe at the mana crystal floating in the middle of the room. A barrier that isolates the inner area from the outer area. This will prevent any new forces from infiltrating. We've succeeded in summoning Rio and Sora, so we've passed the first checkpoint, Miho said, beaming smugly. It was an expression she would never show under normal circumstances. I see. Which was why Celia blinked as she stared at Miho's face. What? Now that we're past the first checkpoint, we have a little space to breathe. I'll answer any questions you have as long as you keep your magic essence under control, Miho said, noticing Celia's gaze. It's just, you're nothing like the Miho I know. She had a faint idea of what was happening to Miho right now, but with the situation being what it was, she hadn't sought any confirmation. But now that she had been told the first checkpoint was passed, Celia shot Miho a searching look. Of course. I'm not her, after all. Don't lump us together, Miho muttered in disgust. Don't lump you together. So am I talking to the wise god Lena herself right now? Not Miho speaking on Lena's behalf? Celia made an accurate guess of the situation based on the information she gained from their conversation. I say Miho's consciousness has completely withdrawn back, she has no idea what's happening right now. Did you think she was speaking with the memories of the wise god Lena? Oh, yes. But wait. Huh? The wise gods were figures of worship in the Stral region. Celia adjusted her tone, thinking it would be bad to speak to Lena like how she normally spoke to Miho. But then she tilted her head curiously, realizing something odd about that. Is it strange for the wise god Lena, who reincarnated into Ayase Miho, to have a different personality to Ayase Miho? Miho, no, Lena asked, guessing Celia's question before she could ask it. Yes. I was told that people who leave this world through reincarnation or teleportation cannot keep their memories. Rio didn't have the memories of the Dragon King, so how come you do? And as a separate personality. I'm not the only one. Aishia regained her memories too, no? Oh. Now that she mentioned it, that was true. Aishia had regained the memories Lena copied to her in the middle of the battle with Saint Erica, creating the opportunity for Rio to awaken as a transcendent one. There are exceptions to everything, Lena said with a meaningful smile. That said, the way Aishia and I retrieved our memories is different. I've kept my personality along with my memories. It's a long story, so I'll keep my explanation brief for now. You know the spell you recently learned that allows you to assume an alter ego? I used a variation of that magic to possess this girl. My abilities are drastically lesser compared to my former self, and I can't use any powers since I'm no longer a transcendent one. Does that mean you're a split personality? I guess so. The main personality is Miho, so I can't come out unless the possession magic is used. I was shocked when Miho suddenly started using powerful spells one after another. After all, Miho was a spirit art caster, and spirit art casters couldn't learn magic. If they did, they were no longer able to use spirit arts. There was no way Celia wouldn't be surprised to see her using magic out of the blue. They're still wasted on this girl, though. Really? It's all magic she can't use. Even if she could, her personality isn't suited for conflict, so you just end up annoyed at how meek she is. No. That's not true. She's a really nice girl. It is. That's why I have to stand in for her, Lena said with a sigh. Even though it's the girl I reincarnated into. Celia stared at Lena, surprised to hear her degrade the girl whose body she was possessing. Like I said already, I'm not that girl. We may share the same soul, but our personalities are separate. That's why I consider that girl a different person to myself, Lena said, as though she could guess what Celia was thinking. But even if you say that, I can't really see it that way. She had reincarnated as Ayase Miho, yet she didn't consider herself Ayase Miho. It was a little too confusing for Celia, who had a strained smile on her face. Really? It's the same as your beloved Rio, isn't it? He considers himself Rio, not Amakawa Haruto. And definitely not the Dragon King. Well, in his case, His personalities as Amakawa Haruto and Ryo have smoothly merged with each other, which probably affects his outlook. That's true. Amakawa Haruto was dead, and Ryo was his current self. This was what Ryo had told Celia himself, so that was something she could understand. Wait, what do you mean by beloved? Celia's snow-white cheeks reddened like ripe peaches. She pouted adorably. Seeing the way you easily accept anything to do with him, love is truly blind, Lena said with a teasing smile. Celia was unable to say anything. Besides, you're the same too, Lena added. Huh? Celia tilted her head, unable to comprehend the sudden information. You're the reincarnation of my disciple. How does it feel hearing that? Do you consider yourself the same person as my disciple? I do not. I don't have any memories of that, Celia said, shaking her head hesitantly. There was nothing left of that disciple's memories, so it was only natural for her to think that, in the first place, reincarnation sorcery is a technique used to be reborn as a different person. A body can only hold one soul. That's why reincarnation sorcery fuses the soul of the person who wants to be reincarnated with the soul about to be born. Do you know what this means? That the person born from reincarnation was originally a separate person to the one who wanted to be reincarnated? In other words, regardless of the one who wanted to be reincarnated, they would have been born anyway. Celia said, forming her answer from the information she was given. Correct. So in my case, Ayase Miho would have been born even if I didn't reincarnate. That's why it's only natural for me to consider myself as a separate person to Ayase Miho. Even my personality is separate from hers. Sure enough, Lena gave Celia's answer a gold star, adding her perspective on top. That's what I find strange, though. If most people can't keep their memories or personality like you, what's the point of reincarnating? The point is to increase one's talent and abilities after reincarnation. Transcendent powers and magic spell formulas can be inherited too. The Clare family was originally a notable family of sorcerers, but your exceptional sense as a sorcerer is because of my disciple fusing with your soul. But even if the soul is fused, if there's nothing left of the memories and personality from before reincarnation, that person from the past life is as good as gone. No. Why would you reincarnate if there's nothing left behind? That depends on the individual, don't you think? In fact, the memories that remain after reincarnation all depend on the spell formula used beforehand. Of course, it's restricted to those born or reincarnated into this world. Those who were born in this world couldn't choose to reincarnate in another world with their memories. This was the basic premise behind why Ryo didn't have any memories of the Dragon King, but still had memories of Amakawa Haruto. Then the reason I've lost my memories of being Lena's disciple despite being reincarnated into this world is because that disciple herself had chosen not to leave any memories behind. Is that what Lena was saying? Celia wondered to herself. For the record, it's also possible to designate the timing of when one will inherit their powers and spell formulas, you know? It'd be dangerous if a baby without any sense of self used their powers or magic unknowingly, Lena added. Then the reason I recently learned my new magic is because the same applied to Ryo and the powers he regained while fighting Saint Erica. Was it all prepared in advance in their reincarnation sorcery? Yes, it was decided in the reincarnation sorcery that you would obtain those spells at that exact point in time. The trick needed for you to regain your memories of Ryo and Aishia was also activated at the same time. I knew it. Celia had a look of understanding on her face, like she had found the missing piece of the puzzle. Then if you use that trick on the others, they should be able to regain their memories of Ryo and Aishia too, right? She said, looking at Lena hopefully. That isn't possible. Huh? Why? Celia wondered, looking like a kicked puppy as her face fell. Or rather, there's no need for that. We're going to use another loophole to get out of this situation. Another loophole? There are other ways of evading the rules of God. Oh. The light of hope returned to Celia's eyes. We're about to activate the sorcery for that now. It'll help defeat the golems above us as well. Are they